This Roman amphora survived 2,000 years completely intact. How did ancient artisans create objects of such impossible durability? We are going inside the workshops to uncover the full story of Roman pottery, from the raw clay pulled from the earth to the final fiery transformation inside the kiln. You will learn the complete step-by-step process that built an empire on clay. We will reveal how they achieved that legendary red gloss and why some of their methods remain a mystery even now. What single piece of ancient technology do you find the most impressive? The journey of every piece of Roman pottery began not in a workshop, but deep within the earth itself. Roman potters were masters of geology long before the science had a name. They knew that the secret to creating pottery that could last for millennia was locked inside the clay itself. They sought out specific deposits rich with iron and other minerals, because the very chemistry of the clay would determine everything from the final color of a vessel to its legendary strength. For their most famous and fine tableware, the brilliant red Terra Sigillata, they needed an exceptionally pure and fine clay, one that could be polished to a high gloss. But for the giant amphorae that carried wine and oil across the empire, a coarser, more robust clay was essential. These pots were not meant to be beautiful, they were meant to be indestructible. Transporting this heavy, wet material was a massive logistical challenge. Imagine the effort of mining tons of clay, loading it onto carts or barges, and moving it across vast distances to centralized production centers. This was not a simple local craft. It was an industrial operation on an imperial scale, built upon the foundation of the perfect patch of earth. Once the clay was mined, the real work of refinement began. This raw material was far from ready for the potter's wheel, filled with natural impurities that could shatter a pot during firing or ruin its smooth surface. The Roman solution was a brilliant application of basic physics, a process called levitation. They would first break up the dried clay chunks and mix them with copious amounts of water in a series of large, shallow tanks or channels. This created a thick, soupy slurry. As this mixture sat undisturbed, gravity took over. The heaviest elements, the unwanted grit, sand, and small stones, would sink to the bottom first. The lighter, finer clay particles would remain suspended in the water for a much longer time. This was the critical moment. Artisans would carefully drain or siphon off this cloudy water, now a concentrated suspension of pure clay, into a second settling tank. They left the coarse sediment behind. This entire purification ritual was not a one-time event. It was repeated again and again, sometimes through 5 or 6 separate tanks, each pass removing another layer of impurity. You can think of it like panning for gold, but instead of seeking a precious metal, they were meticulously washing the clay itself, seeking perfection in its texture. The result of this painstaking effort was a clay body of unbelievable fineness. It felt silky to the touch, with a consistency that was both plastic and strong. This ultra-pure material was the only thing that could be thrown on a wheel to create the famously thin-walled, elegant pottery that symbolized Roman quality, from a delicate cup to a perfectly formed plate. Without this unseen, labor-intensive cleansing, the legendary red glossware would have been impossible. The purity of the clay was the absolute foundation for everything that followed. This purified clay, so fine and silky, was not yet ready for the fire. In a fascinating contradiction, Roman potters would now deliberately add impurities back into their meticulously cleaned material. These additives, known as temper, were the potter's secret weapon against the destructive forces of heat and time. Why would they spoil such perfection? The answer lies in the physics of clay itself. As wet clay dries, it shrinks dramatically. When it is heated in a kiln, it shrinks even more. This tremendous stress can cause cracks and warping, turning a beautiful pot into a broken failure. The temper acted as a skeleton within the clay body. Sharp grains of sand, tiny fragments of crushed pottery called grog, or even organic materials like straw, created a network of tiny reinforcements. These hard particles gave the wet clay something to grip onto as it contracted, preventing it from pulling itself apart. Think of it like adding gravel to soft soil to create a stable path. The gravel does not shrink, so it holds the earth in place. In the same way, the non-shrinking temper particles locked the clay matrix in place, ensuring it dried and fired evenly. The choice of temper was a masterclass in practical science. For a massive storage jar that needed to withstand thermal shock from cooking fires, crushed rock or sand provided brute strength. For thinner, finer wares, the potters used grog, which had the same thermal expansion properties as the clay itself, creating a perfect harmony inside the kiln. This ancient recipe is a gift to modern archaeologists. A specialist can look at a potsherd under a microscope and identify the specific sand from a particular river or the unique composition of grog from a known workshop. The temper acts as a fingerprint, telling us not just how the pot was made, but often where it was born. That humble handful of sand mixed into the clay becomes a tiny time capsule, whispering the origins of an object across 2,000 years. With the clay perfectly mixed and tempered, it finally met the machine that would define its form, the Roman kick wheel. This was not a quiet, gentle art. The workshop was a place of rhythmic motion and focused energy. The potter would sit before a heavy stone wheel set low on a central axle, constantly pushing a lower disc with his foot to keep the entire assembly spinning. This continuous, hands-free rotation was a revolutionary leap beyond the slow, laborious methods of the past. It gave the artisan a new kind of control, allowing him to use both hands to coax the clay upward from a lump into a perfect, symmetrical vessel. The first and most critical step was centering. The potter would slam the prepared clay onto the center of the spinning wheel head, using the force of his palms and the wheel's own momentum to force the mass into a perfect, wobble-free cone. If the clay was not perfectly centered, the entire piece would be flawed, shaking itself to pieces as it spun. Only when it ran true could the true magic begin. With his hands wet and the wheel flying, the potter would thrust his thumbs into the center of the spinning clay, opening a cavity. Then, using the incredible force generated by the wheel, he would pull the walls upward, his fingers on the outside and a knuckle or tool on the inside, guiding the clay into a tall, thin wall of astonishingly uniform thickness. This is the act we call throwing a pot, and it required years of practice to master. The potter had to feel the clay's resistance through his hands, applying just enough pressure to raise it without tearing or collapsing the delicate form. In a matter of minutes, a shapeless lump could become an elegant bowl, a slender jug, or the iconic curve of an amphorae shoulder. This speed and symmetry made mass production possible, fueling the empire's vast demand for standardized containers. Yet for all its revolutionary power, the wheel did not replace older techniques. For very large storage jars or uniquely angular shapes, artisans still relied on the ancient, patient methods of coiling and slab building. They would roll out long ropes of clay, coiling them in a spiral to build the pot's walls, then smooth the seams by hand. This slower process offered a different kind of strength and allowed for forms that the spinning wheel could never achieve. So within a single workshop, the whirring revolution of the wheel existed alongside traditions thousands of years old, a testament to the Roman potter's remarkable adaptability. Each form that emerged from the spinning wheel was a direct answer to a specific need of Roman life. The potter's craft was not about artistic whims, it was a form of practical engineering in clay. The most iconic of all these shapes was the amphora, a tall, sturdy jar with two handles and a pointed base. That distinctive point was not a decorative choice, it was brilliant design. These jars were the shipping containers of the ancient world, designed to be stacked tightly together in the holds of ships or in warehouse storerooms. The pointed base allowed them to be tilted and wedged securely, preventing them from rolling and breaking during a stormy sea voyage. Their long, narrow necks minimized air exposure, helping to preserve the precious wine or olive oil inside for months or even years. This was a vessel built for empire, for moving goods across vast distances with ruthless efficiency. At the other end of the spectrum was the fine tableware Terra Sigillata with its elegant, thin-walled curves. These were the plates and cups of the Roman dinner party, objects of beauty meant for display. Their smooth, flowing shapes were not just for aesthetics, they were designed for easy cleaning and a comfortable feel in the hand. A shallow, wide bowl was perfect for sauces, while a deeper, more enclosed cup kept wine from spilling. Every curve served a purpose, marrying form and function in a way that still feels modern. Then, there were the specialized tools, like the mortarium. This was the Roman kitchen mixer and grinder, a heavy, robust bowl with a thick, overhanging rim and a secret ingredient baked into its interior. Potters would deliberately press sharp grits of sand, or even small pieces of hard stone into the bottom of the bowl while the clay was still soft. After firing, this created a permanent, rough grinding surface. A cook would use a stone pestle to crush herbs, grind grains, or pound garlic against this abrasive interior, effortlessly creating pastes and powders. This single pot replaced an entire drawer of modern gadgets. And when the sun went down, another specialized form took over, the humble oil lamp. These small, enclosed vessels, often shaped like a shallow dish with a spout, were designed for one thing: to hold a wick and a small pool of oil, providing a safe, controlled flame. Their simple, efficient shape maximized light while minimizing the risk of fire, bringing flickering illumination to homes, streets, and tombs across the empire. From the grand amphorae that fueled the economy to the tiny lamp that pushed back the darkness, every single shape was a thoughtful, deliberate solution. The Roman world was literally built on these practical, purposeful forms of clay. But for the most iconic Roman pottery of all, the potter's wheel was only the beginning. The brilliant red gloss and intricate relief designs of Terra Sigillata were not carved by hand onto each individual cup and plate. They were born from a revolutionary industrial process, a system of molding that allowed for mass production on a staggering scale. The key to this was the mold itself, a thick, fired clay bowl into which a detailed scene had been carved in reverse. Artisans would pour a thin, creamy slurry of that ultra-pure clay, known as slip, into the mold. They would then slowly rotate it, coating the interior walls evenly as the porous mold sucked the moisture out of the liquid clay. Within minutes, a leather-hard skin of clay would form against the mold's intricate surface. The excess slip was simply poured back out, leaving behind a perfect, hollow replica of the mold's design. After a short drying period, the newly formed vessel would shrink just enough to be carefully lifted out, now bearing a sharp, finely detailed relief of gods, goddesses, or mythological heroes. This was slip casting, a technique that allowed one single master mold to produce thousands of identical copies. The efficiency was breathtaking. A single workshop could churn out vast quantities of standardized tableware, each piece a flawless duplicate of the last. This was not just craft, it was ancient manufacturing, a system designed to satisfy the immense demand for luxury goods from Rome to the frontiers of Britain. The beautiful, repeating patterns that adorned Roman dining tables from Italy to North Africa were not a sign of individual artistry, but of a brilliantly organized and scalable industrial operation. It was this very capacity for repetition that allowed Roman pottery to flood the known world, turning a local style into a universal symbol of Roman culture and trade. This leather hard pot, fresh from the mold or the wheel, was still a dull, earthy color. The transformation into a gleaming red masterpiece required another layer of ancient alchemy, the application of a special coating known as a slip. Think of slip as liquid clay, a creamy mixture of the same ultra-fine clay used for the pot itself, but thinned down with water to the consistency of rich cream. This was not just a paint, it was a second skin. For the famous red ware, this slip was not ordinary, it was a carefully formulated engobe, which is simply a slip that has been enriched with color-changing minerals. In this case, the magic ingredient was a high concentration of iron oxide, the very same compound that gives rust its color. Potters would dip the entire leather-hard vessel into a vat of this red engobe, or carefully brush it on in a swift, fluid motion. The pot had to be at just the right stage of dryness, too wet, and the coating would slide off or blur the fine details, too dry, and the porous body would suck the moisture from the slip too quickly, causing it to crack and flake. Timing was everything. This single, perfect dip gave the pottery its signature color, but it did something far more important. As the now coated pot was loaded into the kiln, this iron-rich slip was destined to undergo a chemical metamorphosis in the fire, fusing into that legendary, impervious glass-like gloss. The true secret of Terra Sigillata is not merely the red color, but this sealed, non-porous surface that made the pottery both stunning to look at and perfectly hygienic for serving food and drink. Yet, the exact recipe and application technique for this brilliant red engobe remain one of the great unresolved puzzles of Roman pottery. We know the basic ingredients, but modern attempts to replicate the depth of color and the durability of that gloss have often fallen short. Was it a specific type of iron-rich clay from a single secret deposit? Could it have been the pH of the water they used, or a mysterious organic additive that left no trace for archaeologists to find? The Roman potters took the full formula with them, leaving behind only the beautiful, enduring mystery on the surface of a million shattered potsherds. That brilliant red surface was more than just a protective coating. It was a blank canvas waiting for a story. While the molded Terra Sigillata captured scenes in crisp relief, other pots were decorated directly by the potter's hand, turning everyday objects into portable galleries. One of the most common techniques was incising, where a sharp tool was used to scratch fine lines through the still damp slip. This was a quick, efficient way to add simple patterns, geometric borders, or even cursive writing, like the name of the pot's owner or its content. You can almost feel the potter's hand moving, the confident scratch of the stylus creating a permanent record in the clay. A step beyond this was stamping. Workshops would carve small, hard stamps out of wood or fired clay, each bearing a simple, reusable design. With a quick press into the soft surface, the potter could imprint a rosette, a leaf, an animal, or even a name. This is where Roman pottery reveals its industrial nature. Many amphorae bear the stamp of their manufacturer, a factory mark that acted just like a modern brand name or a label of origin. Finding a pot stamped with a name like Lucius Umbricius Scorus tells archaeologists not just who made it, but often where and when, allowing them to trace entire trade routes from a single impression. But the most visually striking technique of all was barbotine decoration. This was the freehand artistry of the pottery world. Potters would create an extra thick, creamy slurry of clay, almost like a cake frosting, and then pipe it directly onto the surface of the pot. Using a simple tool, perhaps a hollow reed or a small bag with a narrow tip, they would carefully apply this clay slip to build up raised designs. The skill required was immense. They painted with clay, creating delicate tendrils, detailed leaves, or lively hunting scenes that stood in bold relief against the smooth background of the vessel. Common motifs connected these humble objects to the grand themes of Roman life. You might find the god Bacchus with his grapes and vines, celebrating the wine within an amphora. A dramatic scene of gladiators in combat might adorn a fine cup, turning a dinner party into a spectacle. Mythological heroes like Hercules battling the Nemean lion were popular subjects, bringing epic tales directly into the home. This combination of mass production and individual artistry is what makes Roman pottery so fascinating. A single workshop could produce thousands of identical molded bowls, while also creating unique hand-decorated jugs where no two were exactly the same. Each pot, from the stamped amphora to the barbotine-adorned beaker, carries a dual message, a testament to both the scale of Roman industry and the enduring human desire to make beautiful things. The vibrant decorations were now locked onto the surface, but the pot itself was still a fragile, waterlogged object. This stage demanded a different kind of skill from the Roman potter, one of profound patience. The beautiful forms, whether from the wheel or the mold, were moved to a special drying area, a space kept deliberately shaded and cool with a constant, gentle flow of air. Here, they would rest for days, sometimes for many weeks. This was not a passive waiting period. It was a critical, controlled scientific process. The goal was to coax the water out of the clay body as slowly and evenly as possible. If the pot dried too quickly, say in direct sunlight or a hot breeze, the outside would harden into a rigid shell while the interior remained wet and soft. As that inner clay finally began to dry and shrink, it would pull against the already set exterior. The result was inevitable, a network of cracks or a permanently warped shape. But the greatest danger was still to come, hidden within the kiln. Any remaining moisture, trapped deep inside the clay, would turn to steam the moment it met the intense heat of the fire. Steam takes up far more space than water, building up immense pressure with nowhere to escape. The pot would literally explode from the inside out, sending shrapnel of clay through the kiln and destroying not only itself, but any nearby pieces. Roman potters were masters of this slow, invisible art. They knew exactly how to rotate the pots to ensure every side dried at the same rate, and they understood how the thickness of a vessel's wall changed the required drying time. A thin-walled cup might be ready in a few days, while a massive storage jar needed the better part of a month. This patient, meticulous process was the final and most vital preparation, the invisible shield that stood between a masterpiece and a pile of broken clay. The final, perfectly dried pots were now ready to face the ultimate trial by fire. Their destination was a structure that was part furnace, part alchemical vessel, the Roman kiln. This was not a simple bonfire. It was a masterpiece of thermal engineering designed with a single goal: to generate and control a blistering, even heat. A typical kiln was built like a brick beehive, partially sunk into the ground for insulation. The entire operation began in the firebox, or prefurnium, a stoking chamber at the base where slaves would tirelessly feed wood through a narrow opening. Above this raging inferno sat the heart of the kiln, the firing chamber. It was separated from the flames by a brilliant architectural feature, a perforated floor made of thick clay slabs. This floor, called the grate, was the kiln's secret weapon. It allowed the intense heat and gases from the firebox to rise evenly into the chamber above, while the solid floor beneath caught the ash and prevented it from smothering the precious pots. Inside this main chamber, workers performed a delicate three-dimensional puzzle, carefully stacking the pottery to maximize every inch of space. They used clay stilts and spacers to prevent the glowing hot vessels from touching and fusing together. Once the chamber was full, the entire structure was sealed with a temporary dome of clay and brick, often with a central opening or vent at the very top. This completed the kiln's updraft design. The physics were beautifully simple. Hot air from the firebox, desperate arise, would rush upward through the perforated floor, envelop the stacked pottery, and then be drawn out through the top vent, pulling fresh oxygen into the firebox below to fuel an even hotter fire. This created a self-sustaining cycle of convection, a river of heat that bathed every pot in a consistent temperature. The scale of these operations varied dramatically. A small local workshop might use a single, modest kiln just a few feet across, firing the needs of a single town, but at major industrial centers, archaeologists have found the remains of true pottery factories. Imagine a landscape dotted with dozens of these brick beehives, their fires burning day and night, producing thousands of vessels in a single firing. The sheer volume of wood required was staggering, a demand that could deforest entire hillsides. Controlling this contained inferno was the potter's most critical skill. By opening or closing vents in the dome, he could literally tune the atmosphere inside the chamber, deciding whether the fire would rage with abundant oxygen or smolder in a reduced state. This single decision, made in the white-hot heart of the kiln, would determine the final color of every single pot, transforming pale clay into a universe of color with nothing but fire and air. The kiln's roaring heart demanded a constant, voracious diet. To sustain the blistering temperatures needed to transform clay into ceramic, Roman potters relied on a carefully calculated fuel supply, with wood reigning supreme. They were not just burning any fallen branch. They understood the science of combustion long before it had a name. Dense hardwoods like oak and olive were the gold standard, prized for their ability to produce a long-lasting, intensely hot fire. A soft wood like pine might ignite quickly, but it would burn out fast, forcing the stokers to constantly feed the flames and risking dangerous temperature fluctuations inside the kiln. Oak, on the other hand, provided a stable, radiant bed of coals that maintained a consistent heat for hours, a vital requirement for the slow, controlled firing that produced the finest pottery. This created a hidden economic chain. A large pottery workshop did not just consume clay, it consumed entire forests. The demand for fuel was so immense that it could dictate the location of entire industrial centers, placing them near vast, accessible woodlands. In some regions, particularly in Roman Britain where coal was readily available, excavations have revealed kilns that used this mineral fuel, but coal burned differently than wood, creating a unique smoky atmosphere that left its own distinct signature on the pots. The choice of fuel was never just about heat. It was a direct lever controlling the kiln's atmosphere, which potters called the oxidizing or reducing environment. When the firebox was stoked with plenty of wood and the vents were open wide, oxygen flooded the chamber. This oxidizing fire would interact with the iron in the clay slip, turning it that famous, vibrant orange-red. But if the potter sealed the vents and reduced the oxygen, the fire would become greedy, pulling oxygen directly from the clay minerals themselves in a reducing atmosphere. This chemical robbery could transform the same iron-rich slip into deep, smoky grays or even a blackened surface. A single kiln load could contain pots of multiple colors, all from the same clay, their final hue determined solely by their placement in the chamber and the master potter's deliberate manipulation of the air. The fire's fuel was not just a source of energy. It was the final, volatile ingredient in a 2,000-year-old chemical recipe. The true color of a Roman pot was not painted on, it was breathed into existence by the very air inside the kiln. This final, fiery transformation was governed by two opposing forces, oxidation and reduction, and the Roman potter was a master of both. When the kiln's vents were left wide open, oxygen rushed in to feed the flames freely. This was an oxidizing atmosphere, a clean, roaring fire that interacted directly with the minerals in the clay. Iron, the most common coloring agent, would rust in this oxygen-rich environment, turning the pottery to the classic warm hues of terracotta, from bright orange to deep, earthy red. This was the straightforward path to the vibrant colors we most associate with Rome. But the potter could choose a different path, a more alchemical one, by slowly closing the kiln's vents. As the oxygen supply dwindled, the fire grew desperate for fuel. It began to pull oxygen atoms directly from the metal oxides within the clay body and its slip. This was a reducing atmosphere, a hungry, smothering fire that chemically robbed the iron of its ability to create red. Stripped of oxygen, the same iron compound would transform, producing a palette of muted, sophisticated colors, from soft grays and deep charcoal to an almost metallic black. The potter's control was so precise that he could orchestrate this shift within a single firing cycle. He might start with the reducing phase to achieve a deep black background, then open the vents to allow oxygen back in, which would turn the clay body itself a reddish color while the already vitrified slip remained locked in its reduced black state. This created stunning two-tone effects. Alternatively, he could smother the kiln at the very end of the firing, capturing smoky, shadowy patterns where the flames licked closest. This was not a matter of chance. It was a deliberate manipulation of chemistry using nothing but fire and air. The potter's final artistic decision was made not with a brush, but with a brick, as he carefully sealed or opened a vent, commanding the flame to create either the warmth of the sun or the depth of a midnight sky. Inside that sealed brick chamber, the fire was building towards its ultimate crescendo. This was the most dangerous and demanding phase of the entire operation, a relentless push to reach the critical temperature where clay would shed its earthly nature forever. The potters needed to drive the heat to a blistering range between 800 and 1000 degrees Celsius. At this threshold, a miracle of material science occurred, a process called vitrification. The individual particles of clay, subjected to such extreme heat, began to fuse together into a new glass-like substance. This is what transformed soft, porous clay into hard, durable ceramic, a material that could ring like a bell when tapped and resist water for centuries. Reaching this temperature was a brutal physical struggle. Stokers worked in shifts, tirelessly feeding hardwood into the roaring firebox, their faces glowing in the infernos, light as they watched for the subtle color changes in the kiln's interior that signaled they were getting close. But hitting the target temperature was only half the battle. The true mastery lay in what happened next, a step called soaking. Once the kiln reached its peak heat, the potter did not immediately shut it down. Instead, he commanded his team to maintain that exact, searing temperature for hours on end. This was not about making the pots hotter, it was about making the heat perfectly even. Think of a thick roast taken from the oven, its outside sizzling while the inside remains cool. The kiln faced the same challenge. The pots stacked near the firebox or the heat vents would naturally be hotter than those tucked away in the cooler corners of the chamber. A short firing would leave the load unevenly fired, with some pieces vitrified and strong, while others remained weak and brittle. The soaking period solved this. By holding the temperature steady, the heat had time to penetrate, to seep into the very core of every single pot, from the smallest lamp to the largest amphora. This patient, sustained soak ensured that the entire load, from top to bottom and center to edge, underwent the same complete chemical transformation. It was a brilliant, intuitive application of thermal dynamics, a testament to their deep understanding that time was as crucial as temperature in forging objects made to last for millennia. Reaching the peak temperature was a triumph of fire, but the true test of a potter's nerve was only beginning. The kiln now held its treasure captive, a glowing mass of ceramic suspended at the white heat of its transformation. To open it now would be catastrophic, inviting a shock of cool air that would shatter every pot into a million pieces. The final, agonizing phase was the controlled cool-down, a deliberate slowing of time itself. Just as the clay had to dry with infinite patience, it now had to cool with that same reverence for the laws of physics. The immense thermal energy stored in the bricks and the pottery itself had to dissipate at a snail's pace. The potter and his crew would begin by completely sealing the kiln, blocking the main stokehole with bricks and clay and closing every vent in the dome. They were essentially burying the fire alive, entombing its heat to let it die a slow, natural death. This was a tense, silent waiting game that could last for days. There was nothing more to do, no skill that could speed the process. The potter could only wait, listening for the faint, telltale sounds of pinging from inside the chamber, the sound of a pot cracking under stress, which would mean weeks of labor lost in an instant. The difference between a masterpiece and a pile of rubble came down to this single, patient act. Finally, after what must have felt like an eternity, the kiln would be cool enough to touch. The moment of truth arrived as workers carefully dismantled the sealed doorway, their eyes straining in the dim light to see the results of their epic struggle with the elements. They were not just unloading pots, they were uncovering a secret, the final color and strength of each vessel revealed for the very first time. A profound silence would have fallen over the workshop as the last brick was pulled from the kiln's doorway. The kiln master, his eyes adjusted to the dim interior after days of waiting, would reach in first, his hands carefully navigating the warm, ashy chamber. Each piece he lifted out was a verdict on weeks of labor, from the mining of the clay to the final stoking of the fire. He would hold a bowl up to the light, his fingers tracing its surface, searching for the slightest hairline crack, a warped rim, or a patch where the glorious red gloss had clouded or blistered. A perfect piece, with its ringing sound and glass-smooth surface, was a triumph, a testament to every correct decision made along the way. But for every success, there were the failures, the pieces the Romans called wasters. Some had cracked under the thermal stress, a victim of an uneven cooling cycle or a tiny pocket of trapped moisture. Others had slumped and warped, their clay body unable to withstand the relentless heat. In the worst cases, two pots placed too close together had fused into a single, useless mass of ceramic, their surfaces forever bonded by the fire. These flawed objects were not merely discarded, they were unceremoniously thrown into refuse pits, broken shards that represented a tangible financial loss for the workshop. Yet today, these very wasters are an archaeological treasure. For modern researchers, a broken pot that failed in the kiln is a frozen moment in the production process. It tells a story that the perfect, shipped-away products cannot. A warped plate reveals the precise temperature at which that specific clay formula began to soften. A piece fused to a kiln spacer shows exactly how the pots were stacked inside the chamber. These failures are the ultimate teachers, offering an uncensored, behind-the-scenes look into the Roman potter's daily struggles and the narrow margin between a masterpiece and rubble. This signature red gloss is one of antiquity's most enduring technological puzzles. The pottery known as Terra Sigillata, or stamped ware, is instantly recognizable for its brilliant, almost liquid-looking red surface, a finish so durable it has survived 2 millennia in the earth with its luster undimmed. We know the basic ingredients, an exceptionally pure clay and an iron-rich slip, but the full recipe remains just beyond our grasp. Modern potters and scientists have attempted countless recreations, yet the results often fall short of the Roman original in both depth of color and that legendary, impervious hardness. The mystery lies in the details we can no longer see. Was the secret in a specific type of clay, mined from a single, now lost deposit, whose unique mineral cocktail was the true key? Some theories suggest the slip was not just clay and water, but was mixed with minute, untraceable organic additives, perhaps plant ash or urine, that altered its chemistry just enough to promote an unparalleled glassy fusion during firing. Others point to the firing cycle itself, proposing that the Romans mastered a precise sequence of oxidation and reduction that locked the color in with a microscopic seal. The resulting surface is not merely a coating, it is a vitrified skin, a non-porous barrier that made the pottery as hygienic as it was beautiful, resistant to staining and absorbing odors. This was not a happy accident, it was the pinnacle of a standardized industrial process, a consistent excellence achieved across the entire empire for centuries. That a technique so widely practiced could leave behind so many unanswered questions is a humbling reminder that the Roman potter's full genius has yet to be perfectly reproduced. Of all the forms born from the Roman workshop, none was more essential to the empire's pulse than the amphora. This was the workhorse of trade, a vessel whose entire existence was dedicated to movement. Its iconic shape, with 2 sturdy handles and a long, tapering base that ended in a point, was a masterpiece of pure function. That pointed bottom was not a stylistic choice, it was brilliant maritime engineering. In the dark, shifting hold of a merchant ship, round-bottomed pots would roll with every wave, crashing into each other and shattering. But amphorae were designed to be packed together tightly, their pointed bases wedged into the gaps between the vessels in the row below, creating a solid, interlocked mass of cargo that could withstand the violent pitching of a stormy sea void. On land, the design was just as clever. The pointed base could be easily driven into the soft earth of a warehouse floor or a sandy beach, allowing the heavy jars to stand upright securely without any need for a stand, a simple solution for temporary storage anywhere in the empire. Archaeologists can look at an amphora silhouette and read it like a barcode, instantly knowing its age, its likely contents, and the trade route it traveled. This is because the Romans developed distinct, standardized types for different goods. The Dressel I amphora, with its thick, robust walls and heavy rim, was the quintessential wine jar of the late Republic, its form perfectly suited for the long sea journey from Italian vineyards to the thirsty markets of Gaul. Later, the Dressel II, with its more elegant, slimmer profile and twin handles, often carried the finer wines from the Eastern Mediterranean. Then there was the massive Dressel XX, a barrel-bellied giant from Roman Spain that could hold over 70 liters of precious olive oil. Its shape is unmistakable, a floating tanker of its day, and for one of the most famous Roman delicacies, the pungent fish sauce called garum, smaller, more cylindrical amphorae were used, their narrow mouths helping to contain the powerful aroma of the fermented sauce inside. Each of these forms became a fossilized snapshot of commerce. When archaeologists find a shipwreck or a warehouse dump filled with Dressel XX amphorae, they know they are looking at the olive oil supply line from Hispania. A cluster of Dressel I shards in a port in France maps the wine trade from Italy. The amphora was more than a container, it was a data point. Its clay fabric, the specific sand temper mixed into it, can often be traced to a single production region. Its stamped handle might bear the name of the merchant who shipped it. Even the chemical residue left inside, absorbed into the porous clay over centuries, can be analyzed to confirm it once held wine, oil, or garum. This humble jar, designed for a single journey, became an immortal record, its very shape tracing the flow of goods, people, and ideas that bound the Roman world together from the deserts of Africa to the misty shores of Britain. That pile of broken pottery, the waster shards discarded by a Roman potter, is an archaeologist's gold mine, while a historian might rely on a crumbling scroll for a date. An archaeologist holds a piece of a broken amphora and reads it like a calendar. This is the science of typology, the simple but powerful idea that styles of everyday objects change in predictable ways over time. The shape of a handle, the curve of a lip, the specific mixture of clay and temper, these are not random artistic choices. They are the fashion trends of the ancient world, evolving with each generation. A potter would learn his craft using the forms that were popular in his youth, and he would, in turn, produce slight variations that his own apprentices would then copy. This creates a continuous, datable sequence. Think of it like the evolution of the automobile. If you found a car with huge tail fins, you would immediately place it in the 1950s. If you found a car with a compact, boxy shape, you would know it was from the 1980s. Roman pottery works on the exact same principle. The thick rim of a Dressel 1 amphora shouts the 1st century before the Common Era, while the slimmer, more elegant Dressel 2 form tells us we are in the early imperial period. This is why finding a single, identifiable potsherd in a soil layer is so momentous. That broken piece of clay can pin a date on an entire stratum, whether it is the foundation trench of a house, the floor of a barracks, or a pit filled with rubbish. The pottery becomes a clock buried in the earth. Its changing styles tick off the centuries with a reliability that often surpasses coins or even written records, because people used and broke pots every single day, leaving behind a continuous trail of chronological breadcrumbs. On any archaeological dig, from a rural farmstead to a bustling port city, the humblest fragment of pottery is never just trash. It is a tiny, timeless piece of a story waiting to mark its place in history. That small stamp pressed into the base of a pot was far more than a signature. It was a brand, a legal guarantee, and a direct line into the bustling Roman economy. When you picked up an amphora stamped with the name Lucius Tedius, you were not just buying a container, you were buying a reputation. This was quality control on an industrial scale. A workshop owner like Tedius was putting his name, his entire business standing, on the line with every jar that left his kiln. If the amphora was thin-walled and broke during transport, the merchant who bought it would not return. That stamp created a chain of accountability from the potter's hands to the merchant storeroom, incentivizing a consistent, high-quality product. But this system served a purpose far beyond commerce. These stamps were also essential tools for the Roman state's vast bureaucracy, particularly for taxation. Imagine a customs official at the port of Ostia watching as a ship from Spain was unloaded. His eyes would scan the hundreds of amphorae, noting the specific stamp on each handle or rim. He was not just looking at pots, he was reading a manifest. The stamp told him the workshop of origin, which allowed the state to track the volume of goods moving through the empire and levy the appropriate import or export duties. This simple mark in clay was a data point in the imperial ledger, a way to monetize and manage the flow of commerce that fed Rome itself. For archaeologists today, these stamps are a gift. Finding a stamp with a known name can aid an archaeological layer with incredible precision. Even more powerfully, it connects us to individuals. We know the names of hundreds of Roman potters and workshop owners, men like Publius Cornelius or the firm of Passianus and Aprodisius, not from grand monuments, but from these humble, functional marks they left on their work. They were not emperors or generals, but their stamps have endured just as long, a permanent record of the everyday craftsman who literally built the empire, one stamped pot at a time. Yet this practical, commercial world of pottery had a parallel existence in the realm of the sacred. The same craftsmen who produced amphorae for wine-created vessels for the gods, designed not for trade but for transcendence. In temples and at outdoor shrines, Romans would leave behind votive offerings, small terracotta statues of deities or miniature pots deposited as physical prayers. These were not masterpieces, often simple and mass-produced, but they held immense personal significance. A pilgrim might leave a small lamp as a request for light in a time of darkness, or a figurine of a healing god as a plea for good health. Some of the most poignant finds come from sacred springs and wells, where thousands of these offerings were cast into the dark water, a silent conversation with the divine preserved for centuries in the mud. This sacred purpose extended into the most somber of human rituals, for pottery served the Roman from cradle to grave. In death, clay provided the final vessel. Cremated remains were often placed inside a simple pot, a domestic amphora, or a specially made urn, which was then sealed and buried. The pot became a permanent home for the soul's ashes. But the pottery's role did not end there. Families would bury their loved ones with grave goods, believing these items were necessary for the journey to the afterlife. They would place beakers that had once held wine, plates that had carried bread, and small jugs for oil, all filled with sustenance for the spirit. A child might be buried with a favorite terracotta doll, while a soldier could be interred with a lamp to light his way. In these tombs, we see the most intimate connection between people and their pottery. The same jar that once sat on a kitchen shelf, holding olive oil for a family's meal, could end its days deep in the earth, holding the hopes of that same family for an afterlife banquet. This journey from the workshop to the tomb shows that Roman pottery was never just a container for goods. It was a container for life itself, for its commerce, its daily rituals, its prayers, and its final, quiet farewell. The Roman army marched on its stomach, but it was fueled by clay. While the legions are famed for their swords and siege engines, their most unsung piece of equipment was the potter's wheel. A campaigning force of thousands required a staggering daily supply of ceramics, from the canteens that carried their water to the massive jars that stored their grain ration. To meet this relentless demand, the legions did not rely on local markets. They became industrial producers themselves. Many legions maintained their own mobile pottery workshops, staffed by soldiers with the necessary skills. These were not just hobbyists, they were military craftsmen following the army's core principle of self-sufficiency. Their workshops could be packed onto carts and moved with the campaign, setting up production wherever the legion made camp for more than a few weeks. Imagine the scene near a frontier fort in Britannia or along the Rhine, where the sounds of marching drills mingled with the rhythmic kick of a potter's wheel, and the smoke from a military kiln rose alongside that from the fort. The output was strictly utilitarian, designed for durability and ease of transport. Their most common products were the simple, robust cooking pots used by each 8-man contubernium group to prepare their daily meals over a campfire. These pots had thick walls to withstand direct heat and repeated handling. They also produced the iconic amphorae for wine and oil, but these military versions often had a distinct, more rugged look, built for the hard knocks of a baggage train rather than the gentle hold of a merchant ship. This military production created a fascinating archaeological fingerprint. The clay fabric used by a legion often contained minerals unique to the region where the unit was originally raised or had been stationed for a long time. A legion that moved from Spain to Germany might, for a generation, continue to produce pottery with a distinctively Spanish sand temper, a geological ghost from its past home. Even the styles were telling. A specific type of bowl with a sharply angled profile might be found at forts hundreds of miles apart, but only along the path of a single legion's deployment. In this way, a broken cooking pot becomes a tiny monument to a soldier's journey. It tells a story not of grand conquests, but of daily life on the frontier, of a meal shared by a fire, and of the incredible logistical machine that allowed a Roman legion to build a home and a pottery workshop at the very edge of the known world. The sheer volume of Roman pottery found from Scotland to the Sahara is not just a sign of trade, it is the mark of a technological conquest. As the legions secured new territories, they did not arrive alone. They were followed by a wave of civilian settlers, merchants, and government administrators, all of whom created an instant, insatiable demand for the familiar comforts of home. This demand was met not by importing every single pot from Italy, but by exporting the entire system of production itself. Roman pottery workshops, with their advanced kick wheels and sophisticated kilns, began to spring up in newly conquered lands from the very beginning. Often, the first potters in a province like Britannia or Gaul were themselves Romans, either traveling with the army or sent to establish a business near a new town or fort. They brought with them the full knowledge of clay refinement, wheel throwing, and high-temperature kiln firing, technologies that were in many cases centuries ahead of local traditions. The local populations, who might have been producing handmade pottery fired in simple bonfires, were suddenly exposed to an industrial revolution in clay. They saw pots that were perfectly symmetrical, incredibly thin-walled, and sealed with a brilliant, non-porous gloss. The appeal was immediate and overwhelming. In a remarkably short time, the old ways began to fade. Native styles of decoration and forms were often abandoned, not by force, but by choice, as people eagerly adopted the superior Roman wares. A local chieftain in Britain would soon want to serve his guests on fine red Sigillata plates, just like a senator in Rome. A merchant in North Africa would need standardized amphorae to ship his olive oil into the imperial trade network. This created a stunning homogenization of material culture. If you were to look at a collection of pottery shards from a first-century home in Spain, southern Britain, and Italy, you would be hard-pressed to tell them apart. The same bowl shapes, the same red gloss, the same stamp manufacturer's marks appear from one end of the empire to the other. This was a conscious political and cultural project. To use Roman pottery was to participate in Roman life. It was a daily, tangible reminder that you were part of a vast, interconnected world, a world where the wine from your Gaulish beaker might have come from a Greek vineyard, and the oil in your Spanish lamp might have been pressed in African groves. The clay itself became a silent ambassador, carrying not just goods, but a unified Roman identity to every corner of the known world. The legacy of these ancient workshops lives on in the hands of modern experimental archaeologists. Today, a dedicated group of potters and researchers is attempting to walk in the footsteps of Roman artisans, using only the tools and materials available 2,000 years ago. They dig their own clay from historic deposits, build replica kick wheels from wood and stone, and construct massive, beehive kilns brick by brick. Each firing is a high-stakes experiment, a direct conversation with the past. These modern practitioners have discovered that the Roman methods were not just effective, they were incredibly efficient. The kick wheel, for instance, offers a surprising mechanical advantage, allowing a single potter to throw a large amphora with less physical strain than one might expect. But they have also uncovered the immense skill required to master these tools. Centering several pounds of clay on a heavy, spinning stone wheel is a feat of strength and coordination that takes years to perfect. The true revelations, however, emerge from the kiln. Modern recreations have shown that achieving a consistent, brilliant red gloss across an entire load of pottery is far more difficult than the archaeological records suggest. A slight miscalculation in the kiln's draft, a sudden shift in the wind, or an imperfection in the clay slip can result in a dull, blotchy surface or a complete failure. Through painstaking trial and error, these modern experiments have proven that Roman potters possessed a profound, almost intuitive understanding of high-temperature chemistry. They could read the color of the flames and the smell of the smoke to know the exact state of the transformation inside their sealed kilns. Yet despite all this learned skill, some mysteries stubbornly remain. Why does the red of a genuine Terra Sigillata sherd have a depth and a metallic luster that modern copies so often lack? Was there a final polishing step with a soft cloth or a smooth stone after the firing? A simple action that left no trace for us to find? Or was the secret in a specific, now extinct, clay deposit whose unique properties we can never fully replicate? Every successful modern recreation brings us closer to the Roman mind, but every beautiful failure reminds us that the potters of the empire still hold a few of their secrets close. That journey from a lump of earth to a ringing ceramic vessel is one of history's great stories of transformation. It was a process that demanded the soul of an artist, the muscle of a laborer, and the mind of a scientist, all working in concert. They pulled geology from the ground, refined it with water and gravity, reinforced it with temper, and then spun it into a universe of purposeful forms on the kickwheel. Each pot was then baptized in a fiery alchemy, where the master potter's control over air and flame breathed color and strength into the clay, sealing it with a gloss that defies time itself. This was not merely a craft, it was a symphony of brute force industry and sophisticated chemical intuition. The true magic of Roman pottery, however, lies not in its technical perfection, but in its profound humanity. These were the everyday objects of ordinary people, The soot on the bottom of a cooking pot was left by a soldier's campfire. The chip on the rim of a fine bowl speaks of a dinner party long silenced. The small, careful fingerprint preserved in the clay of a lamp is a direct physical touch from a person 2,000 years gone. These pots are not just artifacts, they are the most common and intimate relics of the Roman world, connecting us to the daily rhythms of an entire civilization. The next time you see a piece of ancient pottery in a museum, remember the fiery mystery and masterful technique it represents. What Roman artifact would you want to see us explore next? Let us know in the comments below.